This is Jenny Kunkel, and in this video we're going to take a look at the select into statement. This is where we can create a table based off of a query. It's going to use those query results to generate the columns and create the table based off of the table name we specify, and it's going to have all the information that would be in the query results set in the actual table itself. Now, why are they introducing this? Because if we are doing our insert, update, and delete statements this week, it might be a good time to have a copy of a table in order to practice our insert, update, and delete statements. So let's get started with looking at this statement. I'm going to switch over to SQL Server Management Studio and use the Northwinds database. This time we'll be looking at our DBO employee territories. It's going to have two columns, and if I would execute a select against this, it's going to essentially return 49 rows. Now, when I start with my statement, I would just generally write the statement, execute the query, and look at the query results to make sure that I have everything I need for creating that table. And in this case, I'm just going to do a select asterisk from the DBO.employee territories. This is the table I want to access. I'm going to execute this. Yep, looks like everything I need. Then I can go ahead, once that query has been created and I know that it's going to be returning the results, I can just put in my into statement. And in this case, we're going to do dbo.employee territories. I can then execute the statement. Once I have that, we can see that we have 49 rows affected. If I'm collapse my tables and refresh and then expand my tables, I should see that I have the territories copy there. Now, is this copy really the same table that we have above with the DBO employees territories? If we look and expand the columns, it sure looks like it is. We have an int not null, varchar 20 not null. If we look at the actual table definition, our columns, the only difference is it's showing us that it has primary keys and foreign key associations. And if I look in my keys, this is going to give me those associations. So they're not necessarily equal. As far as the table structure with the columns, it's equal. With the data that's contained in that table, it's equal. But with those constraints, it's not equal. So what does this mean? This means that if I decide that I want to insert into my DBO employees territories copy, and I have an employee that doesn't exist in my DBO employees table, when I try to do that insert, it's going to let me because there's nothing that's going to stop it from inserting it, making sure that I have the employee in the employees table before I can insert it in that DBO employees territories copy. It's just going to allow me to do whatever I want to this table. It's not going to check even if I have duplicates, because I don't have my primary key associated with the combination of the employee ID and the territory. So this is not optimal. This is not going to give us a true test of whether, when we write our queries to do our inserts, updates, and deletes, whether they're actually going to work. Now, they may work against our copies table, but when we run them against the real tables, then they may not work. How can we create a table that is going to be more realistic, like our DBO employees territories? Now, if I want to go ahead and drop this because I want to create a new table, I can just go ahead and do a drop, and then I say table, and then the table name. So this is going to be my DBO employee territories, and I'm just going to add the copy to the end of this. Once I do that, I can go ahead and execute that. And if I condense my tables again and do a refresh and then re-expand it, that table is gone. So this is the way that we would remove the table from the database. Now, what would I do in order to create a more realistic structure for my table that includes those primary keys and then any related foreign key associations? If we had constraints, it would take care of the constraints as well. Well, the answer to that is we would come into our DBO employee territories, we would do a right click And then where we have our script table as, we can do a create to, and I can just do it in a new query editor window. Once it completes this, usually takes a couple minutes. And then I have the data definition language, or DDL, that was used to create that table and the relationships between like our employees table and the employee territories, and the territories table and the employee territories. And then also with check constraints, because we see that we have a check constraint here as well. All these different types of constraints and indexes are within this DDL. Once this is generated, then I can go ahead and copy this, then do a Control F to bring up the Find dialog. And if I expand on the down arrow, I can paste it in here and change it to add the copy after it. Once I do that, then I can go ahead, and if I want to do just one instance, or if I want to replace them all, I can just hit that and it'll go through and it'll replace all of those. But I'm not done yet. I've just changed the table name. I haven't changed any of the foreign keys. I haven't changed the primary keys. We already have a PK underscore employee territories. We already have a FK underscore employee territories underscore employees. We need unique names. And in order to do that, I'm going to copy the underscore and then the employee territories, paste it in to both locations, and then just add copy to the last one, and then go through and replace all the instances. Now at this point, I have everything changed. I have the table references changed. I have all of the constraints and any check constraints at all taken care of, and I can go ahead and select everything, and I can execute the script. Now if I condense this, if I go ahead and refresh and expand, I can see that I have my employee territories copy, and if I expand this, now I can see that I have my key associations for my primary key and my foreign key associations. So if I try to insert something that doesn't belong in the employees table, now it's going to error out. It's going to be pretty much the same as what we have with our original DBO employee territories. The only problem is we don't have the data yet. And we'll look at that in the next video of how we can insert our data, because we can't use the select into because it's going to create a new table. If we tried to do that, it would error out if we use the same table name. So we need to use an insert statement to do that, and we'll look at it in the next video. But what about our Data Azure? What about Oracle? What can we do there? If we go into our Data Azure Studio and get into our database, Northwinds, and look at the table, I again have the ability to do a right click and script as create. Then once I'm in here, I can go through the same process where I have my employee territories that I want to copy. If I copy that, I can do a Control F. Again, it's going to bring up the dialog. I have the same type of functionality, and I can just essentially paste this in, change the name, and go through and change everything within here. So I can change those references similar to what I did, and then I can select everything and run it after I get everything changed, all of the table references, and then any of the key constraints changed. So that's one thing. Now what about Oracle? Do I have the same capabilities within Oracle? So if we switch over to our Oracle SQL Developer, we have our HR tables. If I was going to do something for countries, I can do a select into to create that table based off of the SQL results. I also have the ability to do a right click on a table, and there is the quick DDL option. This is what we use to create any type of schema, and we can go ahead and specify a file name. And if I do test countries.sql, it's going to create a file for me. And again, this is running Java, so sometimes it's a little bit slower. It's going to bring in the DDL to create the actual countries table. It's going to bring in even comments for our table. Then we have our primary key, and then we have any associations as well with constraints for foreign keys, etc. So that's going to be something then we can go ahead and do. If I do a find all and replace, I can copy this and do a Control F, and it's going to bring it up here. If I want to go ahead and replace, I would click the little glasses with the arrow, and then I can go ahead and put in countries copy and change all. Now that I have the table changed, then I could go through and change all of the references for the primary key and any constraints as well. So that's one of the ways that I can do it. And then I can just select everything and run it as a script using the script option here. And it would essentially create the same structure for us as the countries. And then if we wanted to remove the table, we could always do a drop table with the countries copy, and then that would remove it from the database. So pretty much the same as what we were doing within SQL Server.